You hear the word person, you think, well, a person, a human being. Easy enough, right? But what if I told you that in the world of law, that same word unlocks something way bigger, something powerful, complex, and honestly, something that completely changed the world? All right, let's get into it. So, what really makes a person a person? I mean, when the law looks at you, what does it see? Well, as we're about to find out, the answer has almost nothing to do with biology. It's all about a brilliant and, yeah, sometimes pretty controversial legal idea. So here's what we're going to cover. First, what does the law even mean by person? Then we'll look at the tricky gray areas, the edges of life. After that, we're jumping into the deep end with non-human persons, debating what they even are. And finally, we'll see when the law decides it needs to peek behind the curtain. Okay, first things first, let's get down to the basic idea. Think about it. The law needed a way to organize, well, everything. All our interactions, our rights, our responsibilities. It needed a central hub for all that stuff. And the solution it came up with? The legal person. So here's the official definition. It sounds a little dense, but stick with me. A legal person is a unit of jural relations. What does that even mean? It means it's not about having a heartbeat. It's about being a kind of node in the legal network. It's like a P.O. box where the system can send rights and collect duties. That's the P. So, when the law looks at you or me, it doesn't just see flesh and blood. It sees a bundle of legal stuff, claims, duties, powers. It's almost like we're characters in a giant video game, the game of the legal system. Each of us has a profile, a set of abilities and responsibilities, all neatly packaged up into one single unit. But here's where it gets complicated. If legal personhood is just a status the law hands out, well, it's not always automatic, not even for humans. And you really see this when you look at the most sensitive moments, the very beginning and the very end of life. And this is where the law has to draw some really careful and, let's be honest, often very controversial lines. Take a fetus, for instance. Legally speaking, it doesn't have its own separate personality from its mother. Now, the logic here is purely pragmatic. If it did have full personhood, it would create this impossibly complex web of duties for the mother. One scholar even called it turning her into a walking incubator. Then you look at the other end of life. A person who has died loses their legal personality. They can't sue anyone, they can't be sued. But the law doesn't just forget them. It still protects their wishes, like a will, through another creation, their estate. So here's the big takeaway from all that. Legal personhood is basically a switch. The law can flip it on or flip it off. It's a totally artificial idea. And once you really get your head around that, the fact that the law can just create a person out of thin air, well, that opens the door to its most radical and most powerful invention of all. And that brings us to the biggest, wildest leap in legal history, the idea that a person doesn't have to be human. I'm talking, of course, about the corporation. Yep, that one single idea is pretty much the engine of our entire modern world. And it's built completely on this concept of a non-human person. So what is a corporation aggregate? It's basically a group of people that the law decides to treat as one single artificial person. It gets its own name, it has its own existence, and get this, it can theoretically live forever. That's called perpetual succession. And its rights and duties? Totally, completely separate from the actual humans who are part of it. This all got locked into place with a huge case, Solomon v. Solomon. See, there was this guy, Mr. Solomon, and he created a company that was, let's be real, basically just him. But when the company went broke, the court made a landmark ruling. The company was a separate legal person. One professor said this dropped an iron curtain between a company and its owners. And that idea? It's still the bedrock of business law today. Okay, but this whole thing raises a massive question, a really philosophical one. If a company is a person, what is it really? Is it just a clever trick the lawyers came up with, a legal fiction, or is it something more? Yeah, what is the true nature of this thing we invented? People have been arguing about this for centuries, and the debate has pretty much boiled down to two main ideas. So you've got two big camps. First, there's the fiction theory. This one says, look, it's just a useful legal trick, a convenient fiction we all agree to. Then you have the realist theory. This side argues that, no, when a bunch of people form a group, they create a real thing, a kind of social organism with its own will. And the law isn't inventing it, it's just recognizing that it exists. This quote from Justice Oputa really nails the fiction theory. The idea is that personhood is something the law makes up and then hands out. The corporation is, in his words, invisible, immortal, and rests only in the intendment and consideration of the law. It's a pure legal creation. But then you have the realists, like A.V. Dicey, who push back. They'd say that when people come together for a common goal, they create something new, a new body that's fundamentally different from the individuals in it. For them, the law isn't inventing anything, it's just acknowledging what's already there.
Okay, so whether you think it's a fiction or a reality, one thing's for sure. This legal personality isn't bulletproof. It's not absolute. Sometimes the law needs to pull back the curtain, or in legal terms, it needs to lift the corporate veil.
And this is a super important check and balance in the system. Lifting the veil just means the court can choose to ignore the company's separate personality. Why? To get to the bottom of what's really going on, and to stop people from hiding behind the company to do shady stuff. So when do the courts actually do this? Well, there are a few main reasons. They might do it to figure out a company's true character. Like in one wartime case, they looked behind a UK company's veil to see if it was actually being controlled by the enemy. They'll also do it to make sense of contracts, and this is the big one, to stop fraud when someone's clearly just using the company as a shield to break the law. Now, this gets even more interesting. To figure out a company's state of mind, to see if it's criminally responsible for something, the courts came up with this amazing analogy from a judge named Lord Denning. He said you should think of a company like a human body. It has a brain, that's the top brass, the directors making the decisions. And it has hands, that's the employees out there doing the work. And this brain versus hands idea has huge real-world consequences. Check out the famous Tesco case. The supermarket got charged with an offense, but the company argued, hey, that mistake was made by a single store manager. The court actually agreed. They ruled that the manager was just the hands, not the brain, the directing mind and will of the company. So his mistake wasn't the company's mistake. Wild, right? All right, let's bring it all home. What's the big takeaway here? At the end of the day, legal personhood is one of the most powerful ideas we've ever come up with. It's a tool, not a fact of nature. We took this idea that started with humans and stretched it to cover corporations, and in doing so, we built the entire modern economy. It creates this separate person with its own rights, but, and this is crucial, it's a tool with built-in safety features, like lifting the veil, so the courts can step in when things go wrong. And that leaves us with one last kind of mind-bending thought. The legal person was a human invention, created to solve the problems of the past. So as we stare down the barrel of totally new challenges, think AI, think entire ecosystems, you just have to wonder, what's the next kind of person we're going to have to invent?